Hi everyone, welcome back to SmugMug Live. This is a very special episode. This one is actually not live. We are recording this special episode which will be premiered at our involvement with Creative Commons Summit 2020. So this episode is going to be all about licensing your image and then specifically Creative Commons licensing. And there's no better person to do that with who has a very interesting story, but I would like to welcome to the show Sebastiaan ter Burg. Sebastiaan, hi, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm doing great. Yeah. And thank you for this opportunity.
No, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for doing that. You have a very unique story to tell about your work and how you use licensing. So I could think of nobody better to have on the show than yourself. So thank you for joining us. Where do we find you today? Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Utrecht in the Netherlands. It's a town I've been living in since '99. So I'm not born here, but I do feel like a native inhabitant of this city.
Yeah, you're born in the Netherlands though, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And of course, we can't travel this year, so Creative Commons is online, and we're recording this so that we can play that as part of our involvement in the virtual festival this year, the virtual summit. So thank you for joining us and telling us about yourself. So I'd really like to get started in having you explain a little bit about your photography and what you actually do.
I started photography in 2002. It started as a hobby, but I was in a very privileged situation. I was a student representative on a national level, and I had the unique opportunity to develop a network with, politicians, ministers, directors of organizations, and all kinds of other people in high places. So I stayed in contact with many of these people in the years after that, and in that time I shot analog, like 3 to 4 rolls a week, just documenting my life as a student representative. But I continued doing that after that. In 2005, I bought my first digital camera, Canon 20D, with a 1785 lens, which I still regret ever selling. And I also started sharing my images online more. I already shared those images that I shot analog because I was digitizing them at home. But my network was seeing my photos and we were still in contact. So they started hiring me. They started asking me like, oh, you have a digital camera right now. We like your work and we like you as a person. Could you come cover our event, or do you want to take my portrait because we know each other already? So that's also, I was privileged because my first clients were Dutch national political parties that hired me to cover their event. I did photography as a job on the side. So I had another day job, and I was doing this in evenings, or I took a day off, or in weekends. But in 2009, I had so many clients that I jumped. I quit my job and I started pursuing a career as a photographer full time. And I also picked up video production in that same period of time. So from 2009 until the beginning of this year, I've been a full-time freelancer as a photographer and a video producer.
That's excellent. So real long involvement in the work, but quite interesting first clients to have those first clients be such, high level client base. That's a really interesting story. When did you first join Flickr? It was quite early on, right?
2007.
Yeah.
Because inspired by a talk of Larry Lessig on how creativity restricts others, I was inspired to start using CC license already, and the only platform using that was Flickr.
Yep.
And Flickr back then was also already one of the biggest platforms to put your work up.
Yeah, I'm gonna just pop over to your site just.
Yeah, the main theme is people. I like people, and from the perspective of just seeing what they do when I'm covering an event, or instructing them for a good portrait. Most of the photos you'll find on my site are event photos, but if you go to the galleries, you can see portraits from very different occasions too. Yeah, I don't discriminate between paid work and personal work.
It all goes
So
on there.
yeah, you won't find photos of my kids, but if I go on holidays and I make nice photos during my holidays, then I'll just put them on Flickr too.
Yeah. And so you said you're attracted to people. So people, all your photographs are about people. What is it you love about portraiture and events, including people?
What I like about events is being the fly on the wall. So taking a step back and not only registering what's happening in front of your nose, but trying to see from a wider perspective what is happening, what's the meaning of what's going on over there, and also seeing if certain people are connecting with each other. What kind of connections are people making? What's the atmosphere of an event? You know, sometimes an event doesn't go as well as you planned, um, and as a photographer, that can make it can put you in a difficult position. Like, are you going to polish it up and make it as beautiful as your client wants to see it, or are you just going to take photos as the raw event that it, you know, there weren't that many visitors as they hoped that they were? And I like switching between those roles and capturing all those elements when you have an assignment for an event. With portraits, I really like to dig into a personality of someone. What is it that you want to show to others? What aspect of your personality? Are you a likable person, or do you want to create a bit of a distance in the portrait that we send out? In the most fun portrait sessions, we have like a plan for different steps from very likable to not likable, from outgoing to very reserved, and to play around with a person and to see what fits best. And in the end, you have like this large collection of all kinds of moods and the way people can see you, and then decide what you're going to use.
Yeah, it's great work, and I'm trying not to spend too much time looking at it while we're talking here. For those people, we specifically want to talk about licensing. So for those people, those photographers who maybe haven't licensed their work before, aren't familiar with licensing, how would you describe what image licensing is?
Licensing is the agreement you make with an organization or another person for the use of your work. You know, do you want financial compensation, or do you want your name to be mentioned? How long can they use your work, or in what format can they use their work? And I've seen photographers in the past that had these calculation models that took into account the size of the print, if it was a magazine, if it's a weekly or a monthly magazine, the kind of paper even it was printed on, because that determines how well the photo comes out. Um, and you know, all those things then influence the price they were asking for their photo. Um, so if you want to have ultimate control over your images, you can go into a very large detail to make a license agreement with a single person or organization on what kind of compensation, financially and not financially, you want for the use of your work.
Yeah. And when did you first become aware of Creative Commons licensing? Was that something that you found out about very early on and wanted to adapt in your work?
Yeah, that was the talk by Larry Lessig. We should add a link to this conversation later on what sparked me. And because photography was a side job for me, and my clients were nonprofit organizations, I already was convinced of the fact that my images should be freely available to other people, because a lot of my assignments were paid with public money. So why not give your work back to the public? And it's also a way of laziness. You know, when you put your photos online with a Creative Commons license, it's already out there, and you don't have to make different licensing deals with everybody that wants to use your work.
Yeah. It's not lazy, it's convenient, right?
Convenient, yeah, that's a better word.
But hey, if it can be easier, then let's do it that way. So, how would you explain specifically Creative Commons licensing to people that are maybe not familiar with it?
So those licensing options that we just discussed are one-to-one, and Creative Commons licensing is one-to-many. Creative Commons licenses are a suite of licenses, so there are several licenses for you as a maker, creator, to the rest of the world, and what they can do and what circumstances they can use your work. So the basic license, the most basic license is CC BY, and that means that anyone is allowed to use your work as long as they mention the title of your work, your name, and the license with it. And by mentioning the license with it, it means that others that see your work know under what license it was shared, and that they can use the work too. And especially online, if people include the links to the source file. So if you use a photo of mine on your own website and you add a link to my Flickr website again, then others can use that photo too because they can reach that photo. Now, other attributions that you can add to that Creative Commons license restrict people if they can make adaptations, or if they have to share an adaptation of your work under the same license, so it lives on. The basic example I give people that if you would take one of my photos and you crop it and you make it black and white, and maybe you add something to it, and if it's under a CC BY share alike license, then you have to share the result of that work again with the rest of the world, so it lives on. And the last attribution restricts people in commercial use. I don't like the no derivatives. That's the adaptations attribution, and commercial attributes, because first of all, commercial is not defined. So then you would still have to look for every individual use. Do you see that as commercial? And there's not a lot of jurisdiction on it. So there haven't been a lot of legal cases that set the boundaries of what is considered commercial and what's not. And when you release your work to be used, then I think people should be free to make adaptations to unleash their creativity to your work too.
Yeah. I'm going to have another little look at your website here, and we can show people examples of where that Creative Commons licensing is highlighted. On your site, Creative Commons images, or do you choose which?
I can tell a longer story on that. So let me start there. When I started using Creative Commons license, I was still very protective of my images. So I used the most restrictive license. That means BY at my name, no derivatives, no adaptations, and non-commercial. That was my start. But because I was taking photos of political parties and a lot of other non-profit organizations, there were a few Wikimedians, so volunteers on Wikipedia, that saw my images on Flickr, and they approached me that I was using the wrong licensing for them to be able to use those pictures on Wikipedia. And one of them, I'm going to highlight him, is Lodewijk Geloof, because he changed my life, actually.
Right.
He had a discussion with me that I should change to CC BY SA. So my name and adaptation should be released under the same license. And he convinced me in a debate of half an hour, and I opened my laptop in 2009, and I switched my entire collection that I was able to switch to CC by SA. So from there, I started using that license. A couple of years later, I had the opportunity to talk to Larry Lessig, one of the founders of Creative Commons license, personally, and he was saying that the share alike is like a friendly form of non-commercial. You know, it's another protection of your work, and I totally agree with him. So I dropped the share alike in 2011 or 12, I think. So it took me several steps to go from the most restrictive license to the most open license. And right now, my basic license is just CC BY. So you only have to mention the title and my name.
Yeah.
But I do have one radical client that's Communia. That's a lobby organization in Brussels for an open society. And with them, I have the agreement that I use CC0. And with CC0, I actively dedicate my work to the public domain. So you don't even have to mention the title. You don't even have to mention my name. You don't even have to refer back to the source. So the stuff that's published for Communia is just, it's out there, and do with it whatever you want to do. There's a small but, because we're talking only about copyright right now. And I take a lot of photos of people, and you still have stacked rights. So apart from copyright, you can have portrait right or brand right, or there might be something in my photo that's a work of someone else that is copyright protected. So there are several layers of rights that can limit the use of an image, and you should be aware of that as a user, but also as a creator.
Yeah, that's a great point, that certain laws around the world can kind of supersede or layer on top of the license that you put out there, and ultimately the person using that image is responsible for making sure that they comply with all the various laws and privacy rights around the world. So you've spoke about how you changed your entire catalogue in 2009 to the license you currently use. You've mentioned the fact that you are a full-time working photographer and have been for many, many years. Those two seem counterintuitive, and this is probably the part that a lot of people are going to be interested in, is how, as a working photographer, ultimately wanting to make money and have a successful business, how is adopting Creative Commons not counterintuitive? How does it allow you to grow your business and make money?
It totally depends on your business model, and it also depends on your approach to photography. My business model was based on the fact that I was being hired to take photos of events or to make portraits. So I was being paid upfront, or when I delivered those photos, I got the money that we agreed on. And my clients are nonprofits, so they are also they share the belief that that work should be available to others to be used too. A lot of photographers are using a passive income model. So they take photos, they go out to take photos, and then they try to sell those photos, which is a totally different model. But still, I think that there are possibilities to adapt an open-based model if that's your approach. My ultimate question would be to photographers, why are you taking photos? Because when I ask that question to a lot of people, their answer is that they love to tell stories. And if your passion is to tell stories, then shouldn't you look for ways that your story can live on without any boundaries, and that it's not limited to those that can just pay for using your story? So, switching to an openly based licensing business model is a big step, but it adds a lot of convenience. As you said before, convenience for you, that you have less administration to do, but it's also convenience for my clients. And what I saw is that I got a lot of new clients because they could hire me more often to make more new work, because they didn't have to pay for work that I already made for them in the past. And that was like a tag-along game that when I took photos somewhere, my clients used that a lot because they were allowed to use it a lot. And other people saw those photos and they were like, oh, we like this model. Can you do work for us too? So it really expanded my network and my client base.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask. Is has the incorporation of Creative Commons licensing, brought you more clients? You're being paid to photograph the event, not per image. So ultimately, the more clients, the more events you can shoot is where you can grow your business. And you've already said that the ease and the flexibility it gives to those clients has brought more clients to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to make that step, I'm not asking you to open up everything right away. There's a blog post I wrote several years ago with the title "The Openness Throttle." You can just start opening up just a little bit and see how that feels for you and what effect it has, and then start opening more and more and more. And you can start by just sharing a few images of an assignment, like not the best photos maybe, but a few good ones, and that you still hold back the rest of the photos for selling those to others that want to use that, or that you limit the size of the photos, or you can play around with those aspects and take baby steps into becoming more open and open and open.
Yeah, and the convenience of the usage rights on Flickr is it's per image. You can attribute this licensing on an image by image basis. So you can, as you say, drip feed a few images into that idea of opening up your usage rights. You could do it for a gallery. You could do it for certain clients and keep it completely restricted for other clients. And you mentioned that you do a lot for probably non-profit organizations and stuff. So, those are probably a really good client base to approach this with if you're shooting in that space. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So let's move on to this question about your images have been used extensively by your clients. Is there a usage case where you've seen your image used that you're either really proud of, or you thought you would never see your images used in that way, or is it something that has, sparked something that is really empowering? What have you seen your images being used for?
There have been some cases where self-portrait of mine was being used in news articles, totally out of context, but those were so funny that I did not complain about it. We talked about it's different rights in the Netherlands too. We have moral rights. So as a photographer, I can also object to the use of my images if they don't align with my own morality.
Yep.
And there was a man shouting at night at 3 a.m. in a town, waking the entire town for several days after after each other, and they didn't have a photo for that, and they used one of my self-portraits where I was shouting into the camera that was on the front page of the newspaper. That's a funny story, but actually it's not the use of a single image. What I want to highlight most is that there's one Wikipedian, and she has written a script that scrapes my Flickr stream, and she gets a notification whenever I upload a new collection. Because if I upload a single photo, it's just a single photo. But when I upload a collection, it often means that I had a big portrait assignment or I had an event to cover. So she gets a notification. Within her interface, she can scrape the agenda of that event and match my photos to the individual people, because sometimes I take the time to add individual names to all my photos, but it's not always possible time-wise. That it's more important to get those photos out quickly than to have all the metadata in there in the highest detail possible. And so she maps my photos to the speakers of the event, and then she transfers my photos from Flickr to Wikimedia Commons so they can be used on Wikipedia, with all the metadata that you can see that I leave in my photos, and added to it all the names of the people. And that has increased the use of my photos on Wikipedia enormously. I'm very thankful for all the Wikipedians, for every Wikipedian that took the time to select a photo and added it to an article, so it has an image to the article.
Yeah, what a great use of two great communities coming together with the database and all that image and metadata we have here on Flickr.com, and then combining that with the knowledge base of Wikipedia. It's a real great use case. I'm sure it makes you very proud to have those images there. What is it that makes you feel really excited about Creative Commons in the future and makes you want to continue using it?
So going back to also the financial aspect, some people sometimes ask me, aren't you afraid of the fact that you put a photo that could have made you a lot of money under an open license online? And I was like, yeah, but that's not something I want to risk. I don't want to protect my photos of that potential impact by limiting it because of a price. And not knowing what the potential impact of a photo is, and seeing that impact later on a Wikipedia page or in a different use, that's what really excites me. So you're putting out your work there, not knowing if it's going to be used ever or in what case, and then being surprised by seeing that use, back in time. So after a while, a photo is relevant again, and it's being used a lot. So I just love the fact of not limiting my work to have that impact. And Creative Commons is more to me right now than just a licensing model that allows me to share my images. There's a global Creative Commons community with a lot of people around the world, lawyers, creators, all kinds of people that work on these licenses and opening the entire world. So that's why I'm very excited to keep using Creative Commons, but especially being involved in the entire global community is, heartwarming.
Yeah, likewise, we're such big supporters of Creative Commons, and so excited to be part of the community it's helping support it and incorporating it into their work. Obviously, as I mentioned, the summit this year is online due to the pandemic. How has the pandemic affected you, and has your Flickr site and the licensing allowed you to continue to do some work during this rather unusual time?
Well, actually, to be honest, after being a freelancer for 10 years, I kind of got fed up with being alone, working alone. And one of my biggest clients, Europeana is a European organization funded by European Commission that brings together all the collections of galleries, libraries, archives, and museums in Europe, openly licensed. So,
Yep.
They do the same kind of thing that I was already doing as a photographer. And we had been friends with benefits for over 5 years. So I wrote them a letter already in January this year that I just wanted to join their team. So I was lucky to make a switch from a freelancer to having a job, just in time. So it's not that I started working at Europeana because of the pandemic, but I needed a change after doing this for more than a decade.
Yeah, photography can be a very isolating business to many people, and that I think that's why so many of these communities that we're involved in, the Flickr communities, the communities within Flickr, Creative Commons, Wikipedia that you've mentioned, the museums, they're very, very valuable resources, and no more so than right now during this time when we're not able to move with the freedom that we had hoped to. But Sebastiaan, it's been a real treat talking to you today. Thank you so much for sharing all that information. If people wanted to find out more about you, I've had your Flickr tag here on the screen, but I'll be sure to post those details in the description below this video. But anywhere else people can find you online?
No, just look for me, put me in a search box, and you'll find numerous sources of old TED Talks I gave about why I started this business model and the kind of work I do right now.
Yeah, well, we're delighted to have you as a a very important part of the Flickr community. Thank you for taking the time today, and we hope everybody has a great summit this year. Hope you've been enjoying all the learnings and insight into what you can do with Creative Commons. And thank you for tuning into this video. Please go check out what we have to offer at flickr.com. Sebastiaan, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Everybody, wherever you are in the world, take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.